All right, one last look at your traffic and weather for your ride in on this Monday morning. Couple accidents to report. One at I-20 westbound and Highway 378. Another one at I-26 eastbound at Bush River Road and Highway 1. And then one at Wessinger and Highway 76. Today, high of 92 with a heat index of 99 with a chance for a late afternoon thunderstorm. Tomorrow, a high of 93 with some clouds and sun mixed in. And then Wednesday, sunny with a high of 94. The heat index for both Tuesday and Wednesday going to be right around 100, so stay hydrated. That's your traffic and weather from the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Center here on the Early Game. Oh, 9 o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry along with you. Coming off of a kind of a busy weekend on a lot of fronts. Obviously, Father's Day holiday yesterday, so happy belated Father's Day to all the dads out there. A lot of sports going on too, man. NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Finals, College World Series, some baseball, Major League Baseball as well. You know, for the middle of summer, it was a little more of a denser weekend than some of the other ones.
Yeah, it was very busy. I mean, you had the U.S. Open as well.
U.S. Open as well. We'll get into that. Don't worry.
Yeah, it was a jam-packed weekend, honestly. And I wish, again, we've talked about it before. I hate how the NBA Finals Game 4 was on Friday, right?
Yes.
And we have not had another game since. Like tonight, we're getting Game 5, which just feels like sacrilegious, to be honest.
It seems like a Game 5, especially on a holiday weekend like Father's Day, would have been like prime viewing, right? Like you have tips off at 8 o'clock or 8:30 or whatever, and that would have been money. But I've had my gripes plenty with the NBA scheduling model. Do you realize the NBA Finals started, I think, like April 20th or 22nd?
Yeah, the playoffs, you mean? Yeah.
Sorry, the playoffs. Like, that was right around the time of the Masters.
Like, we're talking about Easter. We are... The next holiday on the schedule here is, what, July 4th? Like, I mean, it's insane. Like, July 4th is 2 weeks away. Like, that's insane to think about. So... Yeah, I mean, look, let's not get into a whole tangent here just about the NBA because it really was a nice sports weekend. I mean,
it was, and that game on Friday night, we were hanging out at one of the breweries here in town, and they had the game on the TV, and I'm looking up, and Indiana's got a 10-point lead in the second half. I'm like, it looks like they're going to go up 3-1. Like, I really thought they were about to cruise to a comfortable victory there, and then we're saying, oh man, Indiana's got this thing on lock, and SGA puts on his Superman cape in that fourth quarter and goes out there and leads the comeback, and OKC suddenly ties it back up.
Yeah, I mean, what a crazy game. I've been seeing a lot of people giving credit to Scott Foster, the head official of that game, for kind of bailing OKC out and getting them back into that game because, it would have been tough for OKC to come back if they were down 3-1 in this series, but it's 2-2 now. It's a best of 3 at this point because you're going back to OKC for Game 5, Indy for Game 6, and then back to OKC for Game 7. So I really do hope this series does go 7, though. It's been entertaining so far.
Terry sent me a clip of former NBA ref Tim Donaghy that got in trouble for the gambling stuff back in the day, and he was basically explaining in the clip that NBA officials are instructed to adjust what they kind of lean on and what they call more within the finals to try and push it as far as they can. Again, kind of going back to what you said, for Friday night. Do you believe that, again, I don't know if it's manipulating the outcome, but kind of encouraging as many games as possible from the league? Do you think they do that?
Oh yeah, I mean, look, like we said before, the playoffs have been going on since Easter. We're talking about extending it. Let's see, three more games. I mean, it's going to go on pretty much this entire week here. So yes, every week that the NBA Finals can be on the playoffs, like they're going to push this thing as far as they can. I do think this is going to go seven. I think it's just been a good series, but like
Yeah.
the NBA wants this going all the way.
It's been fun so far. I've enjoyed it. Again, this isn't again maybe what the league wanted in terms of like the star power of both teams or the name recognition of Oklahoma City or Indiana, but it's been a fun series. And again, we've had comebacks, we've had crazy moments. Like there's no telling what could be in store for potentially three more games. So I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's been good so far, and looking forward to seeing what's next.
It's also been a fun weekend from a college baseball standpoint with the College World Series, which we'll get into in just a moment. But it is 9 o'clock, and we got to kick things off with our Sandstorm Pick Me Up. Let's try that one more time with our Sandstorm Pick Me Up. No? Okay. Anyways, it is time for your Sandstorm Pick Me Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, you can call George Sink now at 803 all nines. Let's go back to last night out at Charles Schwab Field in Omaha, and this is what happened.
2-2. Swing and a miss! The Teal is for real. Another win. 25 in a row for Coastal.
Coastal Carolina picking up another win last night. It's your 25 in a row there as they continue to advance their way through the winner's bracket out at the College World Series, taking care of Oregon State last night. And as Kevin Shaw said going into it, don't call us a Cinderella, and they're certainly not playing like one right now.
No, they're not a Cinderella. Like I see people saying that, and it drives me absolutely nuts because it's like, okay, yes, they're a mid-major. Yes, they are. Not they're probably not on the same level in those people's eyes compared to like Oregon State or any of the big prominent programs in college baseball. Well, guess what? Coastal's a very, very good program. I mean, they've won 25 games in a row now. They've only lost 11 this entire season. What they're doing is insanely impressive. And they were a national seed coming into the tournament. And they also, I mean, it's not really that relevant, but they won the College World Series in the past decade. So it's like, come on, like Coastal is definitely not a Cinderella story. They're honestly, I think, the best team right now in this tournament. And, they're definitely playing like it one win away from advancing to the College World Series final.
Yeah, and again, if they win three more games, then they are your College World Series champions for the second time in less than a decade. And again, they've been an intriguing story, to watch because of the local connection, obviously, with them being out there on the coast here in the state of South Carolina. But in watching the game yesterday, and I know they got into a little bit of a jam there late, but what Matt Williams has done with that pitching staff out there has garnered a lot of praise. And watching last night's game, they kept talking about, man, Matt Williams done an incredible job, up for assistant of the year and all these kind of things. And, when you kind of go back to the situation here with Terry Rooney and the historically terrible pitching staff that South Carolina had, I don't know what would have happened if Matt Williams got to hang around for another year and coach under Coach Maneri, but it just I think that just further kind of twists the knife a little bit on what was a disastrous season for the Gamecocks, seeing what was one of your former assistants coaching potentially in the College World Series final coming up here in a couple days.
And to be fair, I know it's easy. I know it's easy to say that Williams should have been here and stuff, but I mean, honestly, let's be real. I did not think the pitching staff last year was very good. Now, when he was the pitching coach here for one season, now was that because of him or was that because of a lack of talent? I think there was definitely talent on that pitching staff last year, but not to get too deep into it. But it's easy to say one thing when things are going well in another place for him, but he's doing a great job there. And he definitely should be assistant of the year just because he's done such wonders with this pitching staff at Coastal.
I think it's just more kind of the optics, right? Like you're already upset about what the season was for South Carolina, and then again to see a guy that was on your staff a year ago put out one of the best pitching staffs in the entire country. Again, I understand why Maneri wanted to bring his guy in and Terry Rooney, but again, when you kind of add all things up, it just makes it all that more frustrating.
No, yeah. And look, I mean, who knows? I mean, it's only 1 year, but things will hopefully change for South Carolina next year because they'll have much better pitching coming in. And maybe that'll make the difference. Maybe that's what really is missing here. But also the development needs to improve, as we all know. So,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying good on Coastal to just not make this about South Carolina.
We'll get into what Carolina's been doing in the portal, the latest updates here coming up in just a couple minutes. But I think a comeback of the weekend definitely goes to Louisville yesterday in their elimination game taking on Arizona. 6 runs in the bottom of the 8th inning when they were trailing, I believe, 3-2, if I remember correctly, to kind of put that one on ice and be able to walk away there to keep themselves alive. Arizona becomes the first team to be eliminated in the College World Series. Another elimination game coming up tonight, Arkansas and Murray State. Again, Arkansas was the favorite coming in to win the whole thing, but got bested by LSU the other day and now looks to stay alive, taking on the actual Cinderella of the tournament so far, that being Murray State. Over the weekend, Dan Skirka, the head coach of Murray State, did speak to the media and said a few things straight about the Racers baseball program.
Hey, Dan. Eric Olson with the Associated Press. I just wanted to ask you some, like 3 quick ones here. Like, are you guys at 11.7 scholarships?
Not technically. We're just shy.
Okay. And I've read that you have to teach a class as part of your duties. Is that true?
I don't have to, but I do.
Okay.
I do. I teach. It's coaching baseball 2. And kind of a little tidbit is there's no coaching baseball 1. So I don't know where that got lost at in translation, but I get multiple emails each semester, and it's funny because they call me professor, which is weird. They say, Professor, I didn't take coaching baseball 1. Will I be okay to take coaching baseball 2? And, I kind of give them the smart aleck answer. If you try really hard, you'll probably be okay, but it's pretty neat. It's mostly athletes, and it's cool teaching them baseball. I show them a lot of the same videos that I show these guys, and at the end of the semester, we have a 20-minute conversation about baseball, just kind of informing them to be able to watch the game, maybe coach Little League later in life and appreciate it a little bit.
And the other thing is that I've read is that you cut the grass at the field. Do you do that, or do you hand that off?
I don't cut the grass, so I don't know where that started, but it's blown up. Obviously, I wish some days I was able to just put on headphones and go mow for about an hour and get away from everything else. But no, we got some guys that do that for us.
We stand corrected. What we thought was one of the cooler parts of the Murray State story, that Dan Skirka cuts the grass at their home stadium, turned out not to be true, but still a neat story. Again, he's teaching a class that are probably operating at 1/10 of the budget of what these other programs at the College World Series are operating at. And again, they got a tough challenge tonight taking on Arkansas, but I feel like the majority of people, unless they're playing your team, are cheering on the Racers.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. And you hear the kids talk about it too. Like, just being in Omaha is extraordinary. Like, it's like going to a whole nother. It's like college baseball heaven, for those guys that are there. And you just hear their coach talk about it. Obviously, I mean, it's so cool to see a team like this there. And they are on the verge of elimination after losing to UCLA, but they're playing an Arkansas team that historically, we talked about the other day, man. Arkansas has had their chance to win a College World Series, and they definitely blew it. And whenever it comes to being in Omaha, they seem to struggle a bit. So, I wouldn't count Murray State out just yet. But if they do go 2-Q, it's been a fantastic season, and one that's definitely going to change the trajectory of that program.
And really, in today's world with NIL and transfer portal, this really shouldn't happen, right? Like, these kind of stories shouldn't be possible because theoretically, all the good talent from mid-major programs is supposed to leave and go to higher-end schools, to where you don't allow a team like Murray State to build up what they have to go on this kind of run they've gone on, which I think makes this all the more special because you don't really know when you're going to see this kind of thing again, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, we've seen 4 seeds get here in years past. Heck, Oral Roberts, the most recent one, a year or 2 ago. But yeah, to see something like this, like with the backstory is so important, and it's very cool to see it. And yeah, I mean, in this day and age, NIL is so dominant, but this just goes to show that you don't have to have all the money in the world to be at this level of college baseball.
Murray State and Arkansas at 2 o'clock on ESPN in the elimination game, and then UCLA and LSU in the winners bracket coming up tonight at 7 o'clock. Coastal Carolina be back in action tomorrow night. Tomorrow, well, not till Wednesday. They got a couple days off as they've advanced in the winners bracket. They'll play the early game on Wednesday as they again look to punch their ticket to go to the College World Series final coming up later on this week. Speaking of baseball, we'll dive into what the latest is with South Carolina and the transfer portal. As a lot has been happening since we last talked about it. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in, Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Veltri with you on your Monday here on The Game, talking a lot of college baseball. And it's been a few days, Jack, since you and I really kind of dove deep into what South Carolina's doing in the transfer portal. Of course, we knew that was the big MO for Coach Maneri this offseason, was really kind of flipping the roster over, purging the talent that he seemingly didn't know what to do with or couldn't do enough with, and bringing in a lot of fresh faces, which he's obviously done, as we've now gotten into the double digits when it comes to total guys brought in out of the transfer portal, a lot of them from very notable schools, and again, so some pretty interesting names that have come in just these past couple days alone.
Yeah, no, they continue to add so many good pieces to this team. It's gotten to a point where they're going to have one of the best transfer portal classes in the country, and that's a really good sign. I mean, this staff, you got to give them a lot of credit. Like, whatever your opinion on them is after last season does not matter, because they have done a fantastic job recruiting in this summer cycle here, and it's going to lead to potentially much better results in 2026. Now, we'll see what happens. It's still a long time from now. They have a great roster on paper right now with a little bit more work to go, but this is shaping up to be something that could be very different next season compared to what this year was.
Whenever we get somebody in from the transfer portal, we look at their numbers and maybe look up their highlights and all those kind of things. And, everything is always going to kind of skew positive. Like, hey, here's what this guy did at his prior school. He can do all these kind of things for South Carolina. You obviously cover this closer than anyone. Who out of all these names on the portal so far excites you the most for what they have the potential to do coming in here at South Carolina?
Ooh, that's a great question. Honestly, I'm going to narrow it down to a pitcher and a hitter, just to kind of break it up a little bit, because it's tough to narrow it down to one guy. I would say, as far as hitting goes, I'm really excited to see what Ethan Lizama does. He is an outfielder from Western Kentucky. I mean, he hit 15 homers last year, drove in 60 runs. I mean, look, you're losing Ethan Petrie and Nathan Hall this summer to the MLB draft. That's a guy that can easily do a lot of damage that those two did combined this season, I think. And yes, those are just the numbers he put up at Western Kentucky, but I think it's something to really keep an eye on, because he's a left-handed hitter, and that stroke at Fender's Park could work out really well. The other name I'm really excited about from a pitching standpoint, if they can figure out a way to get his command in order, Elijah Foster from Sacred Heart could really be a nice piece to have, because, I mean, he struck out 76 guys last year, which is great, but he also walked 53. That's far more than any transfer they're bringing in. A lot of the transfers they're bringing in are guys that don't have walk issues, but Elijah Foster's got 53 walks from Sacred Heart, so you got to get that down. But if you can, we're talking about a guy that has a plus fastball, one of the better ones out there, with a potential 5-pitch mix, a 5-pitch repertoire that would be really nice for South Carolina, whether it's in the starting rotation or it's in the bullpen. So those two guys in particular are the ones that stick out to me.
Quick note, and you put this in your story about Lizama coming over from Western Kentucky. He is draft eligible, so there is a chance he could opt to not come to South Carolina and instead pursue the pros, depending on where his name gets called.
Yeah, and I was looking it up the other day. I may have just missed it, but I did not see it when I was searching. He's not in the draft combine, so okay. I guess that's somewhat of a good sign, and, we'll see what happens with that. I mean, there's 20 rounds of this draft, so he could be taken. Who knows? But honestly, I mean, it might be in his best interest to come to South Carolina, just because he could be a higher draft pick potentially. I mean, I don't know where he's going to be projected right now. I would say later rounds, but if he's able to come to South Carolina, we're talking about a guy that could really be a difference maker for next year.
So let's kind of assess where the team stands as of right now, because, again, it's been a lot of going in and coming out and all that kind of stuff with the portal. Important to note as well, I believe this was on Friday, it seems like Jackson Soucy has changed his mind and opted not to come back.
Yeah, so I think it's just one of those things where you're going to have to cut guys, and there are only 34 roster spots for next season, because that's different from the 40. And, Kevin Schnall was talking about earlier, or I'm sorry, whoever it was talking about it earlier in that clip we played.
Dan Skirka from Murray State.
Yeah. I was trying to think of who it was. But the scholarship's changing from 11.7 to 34 full scholarships. So that's going to be different, where the roster's going to have to be trimmed down even more than it was last year, and you got the guys. And I think that's what we saw here with Susie, and they've had to do the same thing with some JUCO guys and whatnot. So not totally shocking, I guess, but yeah. So that's probably the one guy right now that is definitely not coming back.
So assessing things right now, Lee Croy coming back at catcher. You got your two guys on the either side of the infield, and Scobie and Hollins. As far as pitchers, you got McCoy, Palmer, Russell, and Marlott. And then everything else, for the most part, is transfer portal guys. So, again, the majority of your starting lineup going to look vastly different than it did a season ago.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's going to look exponentially different. And I think when we talk about some of the positions here, I honestly think Reese Moore from Iowa, your latest addition out of the portal at catcher from Iowa, I think he's your starting catcher next season. Like, I don't see a lot of upside with starting Talmadge Lee Croy catcher. That to me, and Talmadge is a good player and stuff, but I don't think if he's your starting catcher, that screams a big problem to me. Like, that should be a backup catcher right there, maybe DH, whatever the case might be. We're talking about going backwards, right? You need to progress forward, and
sure.
What happened last year did not work. So, Talmadge was not very impressive in his time behind the plate last year. I know he was hurt. I know he could be better, but I think Reese Moore is just a significantly better upgrade than anything they have behind the plate. And then I would not say for sure that KJ Scobie is going to be a third. I would look at him maybe moving to short, because you have a lot of corner infielders from JUCO, high school, transfer portal coming in. And so maybe that's something where the staff wants to move KJ to short. He's been playing shortstop with the Blowfish this summer, so that's something to keep an eye on. But, they also have some guys that there's only one DH spot, and Bo Hollins is at first base. So you're going to have to figure out a way to get some of these other guys like Logan Sutter and Dawson Harmon, guys that bring a lot of power to the lineup. You got to be able to get them in there somehow, and maybe moving KJ short would be the answer.
Yeah, again, as we've talked about so many times, the goal of the offseason was apparently to change a lot of things, bring a lot of guys in the transfer portal, and that's what they've done so far. I imagine they've got to have one of the bigger portal hauls in terms of like overall numbers in the entire country, at least up to this point. Again, the portal's still open for another 2 weeks, so there's no telling, what more stuff can happen in terms of guys going in or guys, coming out of it and come to South Carolina. But as we keep looping back to, okay, you're doing what you wanted to do. You've got more budget to work with, according to Jeremiah Donati. Go out there and give us better results next year.
It's been crazy. I've been using 64 Analytics as a nice reference piece for where South Carolina sits in the portal and all this stuff and the rankings. And shout out to them because they do a great job over there. But South Carolina's got the second best portal class in the country right now. And that says a lot. You look at how the portal can flip a roster in a season. When you have a top 5 portal class, you have a very good chance of not just getting back to the postseason, but doing some damage next year. And I think South Carolina is in a spot where this roster should be good enough to contend for a national seed next year. They're doing a very good job so far this summer. The staff putting together the roster they envision can get them to where they want to go.
Now, does the sheer number of guys you're bringing in kind of skew that number a little bit in terms of what the ranking is, just because you're talking about so much talent compared to some schools that may not get as much out of the portal?
Potentially, but I think when you look at a lot of these schools that are in the top 10, for instance, again, a lot of them have like the 4 to 7 guy kind of range in terms of how many transfers they've got committed. But then there's South Carolina with 13 guys committed, and then you have Georgia with 11. And the big thing here that 64 Analytics does, they have their top 250 committed players. So they do a ranking of every single player. And South Carolina's got 8 guys in the top 250. So I think that's what really does separate them in terms of having the high portal ranking and all that. And it makes sense. Like a lot of the guys that they do have up here, yes, some of them have a high up. Also, some of these are just really good players they're bringing in. So a lot to like the Gamecocks have done, just basically covering all the bases with the outfield needing an upgrade, catcher, middle infield. I mean, they've really hit it out of the park so far.
Again, busy summer so far, and still 2 more weeks of the transfer portal to see what else happens from an Aries team as they look to rebuild for 2026. We'll transition over to golf. Coming up next was a crazy ending to the U.S. Open, and Rory McIlroy is getting frustrated and looking for motivation. We'll dive into that coming up next as well. It is The Extra Point, Tyler Head and Jack Beltry with you on your Monday on the Game. Tyler Head here for our friends over at Twin Peaks. Yes, we are in the middle of summer, but the sports content is still red hot as of right now. You've got game number 5 of the NBA Finals coming up tonight. You've got the Stanley Cup Finals rolling on. You've got the College World Series. You've got Major League Baseball happening every single day. So get yourself down to Twin Peaks any day, anytime, and taking all that great sports action with their TVs as far as the eye can see. And don't just sit there on an empty stomach. Order some amazing food, whether it's burgers, wings, whatever your heart desires. I guarantee you Twin Peaks has that for you, and it is absolutely delicious. And don't forget to top it all off with a 29-degree draft beers. They literally have a thermometer in the store that tells you how cold the beers are at all times. So get some delicious food, get some cold beer, and take in all the great sports action today or any day with our friends at Twin Peaks, right down the street in the Vista.
Cozy it up. Don't need to make it. 2 putts.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry with you on your Monday here on the game. That was the call yesterday on NBC. J.J. Spawn sinking, I believe, Jack, was a 64-foot putt to win the U.S. Open yesterday out at Oakmont. He had struggled early on the front nine of the final round and was able to put together a phenomenal last nine there as capping it off with that phenomenal putt, to win the whole thing and probably shock a lot of people in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of golfers struggled out there at Oakmont this weekend, and yeah, JJ Spawn. I mean, that putt was absolutely insane. Like, just it just once it got kind of closer, it's like, oh my gosh, this thing's gonna go straight in. Like, it was kind of crazy to think about, but yeah, I mean, good for him, and yeah, just a very, I don't know how to describe this U.S. Open because it was very, very strange compared to the other. The other majors so far this year.
Yeah. Again, Oakmont is known as a relatively tough course, and everybody was having trouble with that over the course of the weekend. And when you kind of look at the results there at the very end, it wasn't packed with a ton of the biggest names in golf. Towards the very top, again, Spawn, McIntyre comes in second. You had Hovland, Cameron Young, notable guys. Tyrell Hatton coming in, tied for fourth with Carlos Ortiz. It wasn't quite especially when you talk about majors, it wasn't Scotty Scheffler battling it out there or Rory McIlroy, who'll get to him in a moment, Brooks Koepka. Like, it wasn't quite the who's who that it came to down there at the very end, which, again, I think surprises a lot of people, again, especially considering how tough of a course that is.
Yeah, you had so many top golfers in the world that got cut, after day two. I mean, like Bryson DeChambeau, last year's U.S. Open champ out at Pinehurst, was cut after day two.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of crazy. And then you see like Scotty Scheffler's the best golfer in the world, right? Like,
yeah.
He starts the weekend out tied for 47th, and then he gets all the way to tied for 13th going into Sunday. And, that's kind of crazy to think about a guy like that who normally is, I mean, you look at the PGA Championship just a few weeks ago. I mean, he was leaps and bounds better than everyone. He won that by 6 strokes? Like,
mm-hmm.
The fact that he was 4 over and tied for 7th, and being 4 over in this tournament, JJ Spawn was 1 under, but everyone else was plus. I mean, so for Scotty, a guy that is viewed as the best golfer in the world, to finish tied for 7th at 4 over, it's crazy to think about, and that just goes to show just how tough this course and how tough this U.S. Open was.
A lot of conversation going into the weekend, and he talked about it, I believe on Thursday, was Rory McIlroy talking about the struggle for motivation right after he's completed the career Grand Slam, winning the Masters a couple months ago. And there's not any audio for this, but he said following his final round on Sunday, if I can't get motivated to get up for an Open Championship at home, then I don't know what can motivate me. I climbed my Mount Everest in April, and I think after you do something like that, you've got to make your way back down, and you've got to look for another mountain to climb. And Open at Portrush Portis is certainly one of those, talking about the Open Championship, coming up later. And again, when you kind of think about what he was chasing for so long, that milestone of winning the Masters, completing the career Grand Slam, and he finally did it, and everybody was supporting him because of that. Now it's like, okay, now what do you do? And look, some guys like Tiger Woods, go on this warpath of just trying to dominate everything and become the greatest golfer alive. It seems like Rory McIlroy's almost kind of exhausted all that energy by accomplishing what he set out to accomplish, and now he's trying to find that next carrot to chase after.
Something is definitely up with Rory, and I think it's such a mental thing, I think, for him, because, look, him winning the Masters 2 months ago, that was the major burden lifted off his shoulders, because he hadn't won a major since 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And That's just he had so many heartbreaking losses. You go back to the U.S. Open last year, where he basically blew it for himself when Bryson won the Open out at Pinehurst. And then there's just been so many other notable moments where it's like Rory's been this close. And for him to finally win the Masters was huge. He got the career Grand Slam. But ever since then, I mean, he's been playing awful. And this is a guy coming into the year had been playing some of his best golf. I mean, he already had 2 tour wins, winning at Pebble Beach and then winning the Players Championship a few weeks before the Masters. And since then, he's finished tied for 7th at the Truist Championship. He finished tied for 47th at the PGA Championship Major. Then at the Canadian Open, he missed the cut. And at the U.S. Open, tied for 19th. So we're talking about a guy that has struggled a lot. He did mention the fact that, you know, the British Open is coming up. And so maybe going back to the homeland and stuff will be very motivating and it'll get him right. But he's in a downward spiral right now. And it's not just the play on the course that's the issue. Him talking to the media the other day and just saying that, obviously we know he does not like talking to the media, but him coming out publicly and saying it.
Sure.
And the fact that he's earned the right that he doesn't have to, like, he can do whatever he wants. You don't hear the best guys that have the career Grand Slam talking like this. So it's very, I don't know if disheartening is the right way, but I mean, we should be used to it with Rory at this point, since you don't necessarily have to talk to the media if you're on the PGA Tour, but it's not something that you would hear Jack Nicklaus or Tiger or any of those guys say.
Yeah, and again, he had so many people behind him winning the Masters. You hate to see it kind of start turning back in the other direction again with the way he's kind of handled himself with some of the media availabilities and stuff. And I was trying to think about this over the weekend, where you have somebody that achieves the highest of highs in their sport and then immediately kind of starts falling off. And the only thing I can really compare it to, and again, this is a different sport, team sport, not quite the same thing, but like, remember when Ed Orgeron, after he won the national championship, he just kind of phoned it in for the rest of his time at LSU and, you know, wasn't vetting out guys he was hiring, wasn't focusing on recruiting. Like, he's like, hey, I did the thing, and now I'm going to go out there and just have fun. And, you know, we know about his escapades with some of the young women on campus and things like that. And again, it's a little bit comparing apples to oranges, but when I think about Rory finally getting to that mountaintop and then struggling to find motivation after that, that's kind of the one thing I compare it to. But though I think Ed Orgeron just kind of went into I don't give a crap mode, which I don't think Rory's in. I just think he's struggling for motivation.
I disagree, because you hear him on Saturday talking about like his goals for Sunday and stuff, and it's like I just want to get out of there in under 4 hours. Like, I mean, this is a guy that definitely phoned it in for the weekend, and it's tough when you're not in the running to win this tournament and stuff, a major. You know, you're kind of just like, let's just get through the weekend, because it's like you didn't miss the cut, you made the cut, but then you got to play at this point. And so I understand him wanting to get through it and all that, but yeah, really, really tough weekend for him and stuff. And again, it just goes back to the whole thing at the this tournament this weekend. You had Wyndham Clark destroying lockers and stuff at Oakmont. I mean, it was a catastrophic, kind of crazy U.S. Open for this year.
Well, and I think about, golf obviously is always trying to find the next Tiger Woods, the next guy that can build their entire sport around, that's going to take it to high heights. And look, Scottie Scheffler is the best golfer in the world. Like you said, he's not the most marketable person because he doesn't have much of a personality. Rory does have a good personality, but when you have what is your Masters champion this year and one of the best golfers in the game right now, again, just talking about, I want to get out of there in 4 hours, that's a little bit hard to say, yeah, watch this guy who doesn't want to be there apparently.
Yeah, it's not ideal. And Rory's has been so brief when he has been speaking to the media. I mean, it's quick to the point, one sentence, that's it. And then, yeah, I mean, look, Scotty should be the guy that is the most marketable and stuff, but he's not. Bryson's probably the guy that is, but Bryson hasn't been playing super well lately, and he hasn't won a major yet this year. So you're kind of hoping those two guys, Scotty and Bryson, be your guys, but you'd honestly like Rory to be your face of the sport as well, because he is the poster boy for the PGA when LIV became a thing.
Sure, absolutely. So that happened yesterday out at Oakmont with the U.S. Open, with JJ Spawn winning that one with the crazy putt there, going 64 feet to win the entire thing. Also yesterday, a very busy day in the world of Major League Baseball. We'll get into some of that chaos coming up next as the X Point rolls along. Tyler and Jack on your Tuesday. It's Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you, wrapping up hour number 1. Was a interesting day in Major League Baseball yesterday. The Braves in game number 3 against the Rockies, they had won the prior 2 to claim the series, but had the afternoon game yesterday. Grant Holmes gets start for the Braves, 6 1/3 innings, 15 strikeouts. Jack, if I told you a pitcher for any team had 15 strikeouts, would you ask me how much they won the game by?
Yes. Any sensible person would think that is the case.
Well, if you ask me that question, I'd say they lost by 9 runs. The bullpen completely imploded the second Grant Holmes got out of there as they fall 10-1. Again, they had already won the series, but for a team in the Braves that is clawing for every win they can get at this point, try and get themselves back in the playoff race, despite winning the series, dropping a 9-run loss to the Rockies does not help them out too much.
I think that sums it up right there. For a starting pitcher to have a career day, 15 strikeouts, he pitched pretty well, and then lose by 9 runs. That's to the worst team in baseball, mind you. The worst team.
I think I saw a stat somewhere that said that's the most strikeouts for a starting pitcher with the Braves since they moved to Atlanta in 1966.
It's crazy. It was a very, very nice performance yesterday for Holmes.
Yeah, what a waste. I mean, again, they still won the series, but again, everyone you can get, and when you have the Rockies coming into town, it's asking a lot to say, oh, you should sweep a team, but yeah, you should sweep the Rockies.
You should be able to sweep them, especially behind that kind of pitching performance, but the bullpen, one of the many issues with this Braves team.
Unfortunately, when it comes to sweeps, the Yankees were on the wrong end of that this past weekend when it came to the bitter rival with the Boston Red Sox, though some interesting news coming away from that. But, Jack, I believe you have a rant about the Yankees you want to share?
I've thought about it more. The other piece of news is probably a little bit more pressing. I'll just say this. I am frustrated with the Yankees after this weekend, especially after having Mike Yuva and all his goons in my mentions all weekend long. Look, the Yankees just played terrible this weekend. Base running was awful. Defense was terrible. It's June. It's one series, but also they suck against the AL East this season. So they got to figure it out and do it soon here, but we'll see. But the other piece of news is a lot more pressing, a lot more interesting, I would say.
Well, somebody that's given the Yankees headaches for years and years now is no longer going to be a problem, at least from inside its own division, as the Boston Red Sox have traded Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants.
I was stunned when I heard this yesterday. I was driving, and I had my brother in the car with me. He's like, dude, Rafael Devers just got traded. I'm like, no. Go see if Jeff Passan tweeted it out. Go see if Talking Baseball.
Is that like NBA or MLB Centel or something putting that out there?
That's what I thought at first, but then Jeff Passan put it out. I'm like, all right, this thing is surprisingly legit. Look, it's been known for months now that the Red Sox and Devers have had a rough relationship this year, and that came when they signed Alex Bregman to come play third base for them. That kind of left Rafi in a situation where he thinks he's a third baseman, but let's be real, he's much more of a DH. And so he's heading to San Francisco, and he's not going to be playing third base there since they already have their third baseman. And, the haul that they got back, not very impressive, I don't think. And it's to offload a lot of money, but this move comes off as the Red Sox being very cheap, and it's just not necessarily ideal. You have a lot of fans that are pissed off about it, but also at the same time, the money that they are freeing up with Devers, it's like over $260 million for 9 years. We're talking about them being able to potentially go out there and spend that money wisely on their young core or go out there and get some pieces. So this is definitely just a weird situation right after the Red Sox just swept their rival, and we're getting hot.
So there's a small silver lining coming away from the weekend that at least when it comes to divisional play, you won't have to deal with Rafael Devers anymore, right?
Thank God. The guy's hit like 31 home runs against the Yankees. I could not be more excited. And I'm glad the Red Sox have kind of mismanaged this because they did this with Mookie Betts and they did this with Devers here. It's insane to think about.
Well, crazy day yesterday in Major League Baseball. Jack, you're off to Arizona for a week.
Yep, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Looking forward to being back in a little bit here.
Sounds good. Hour number 2 of the Extra Point up next here on the game. Damn it. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Hour number 2. Tyler Head. Sam Shapiro now hanging out with me as he does on Mondays. Halfway through the month of June. How we doing, Sam?
Just another Monday in paradise, Tyler. I'm going to be upset after this week when the finals are over. But
yeah, it's been fun so far.
It's been exciting. A lot more than I feel that has kind of been brought up to speed, at least portrayed in the mainstream media. But
sure,
I still can't get over what we were talking about last week, the Commissioner Cup, or no, mixing it up. The play-in tournament court versus how the courts look now. It's just the aura is not there.
They finally did put the script finals. I'm assuming that wasn't CGI. I think that was actually legitimately on the court the other day. So they're kind of listening. But it's certainly still a work in progress. I'll say that much.
Yeah, well, the series at least has been pretty exciting otherwise. At least now it's 2-2 going back to Oklahoma City.
Yep.
So it's almost kind of like 0-0, but whoever wins this next game is really going to be a clear favorite to win.
And we'll get into the specifics more of the NBA Finals coming up here in a couple of minutes. Let you hear of what happened in game number 4 on Friday night with the comeback by Oklahoma City. But starting off the hour here, 10 o'clock, kind of been introducing something new lately called the Gamecock Word of the Day. It's kind of something relevant to whatever's happening in Gamecock sports. Unfortunately, we're in the dead middle of summer, and there's no actual Gamecock sports happening as of right now, and there won't be until South Carolina tees it off with Virginia Tech coming up in 76 days. But the word that I'm thinking about for today, though, is confident, right? Despite the fact there's no sports going on right now, and yes, what we saw for the end of baseball season wasn't great, kind of looking ahead, and this can encompass all sports, right? And everybody in every offseason, everybody's confident until you start playing games, right? Then, your opinions change one way or the other, depending on wins and losses. But when you look at what everybody, I'm going to talk about all sports here, what everybody's doing in this offseason, you feel optimistic and confident to a degree, I think, with all sports. So you have baseball that's going crazy in the transfer portal right now. Softball is obviously making some moves themselves, coming off of a very strong season. Women's basketball has already signed some good players out of the portal themselves. Men's basketball's gotten crazy in the portal too. And then football, again, the portal stuff's kind of been set for a while now, but there's a lot of optimism surrounding Lenore Sellers coming back and Dylan Stewart. They're doing a lot of things this offseason when it comes to the camps and the commits they've got in the past week, 3 last week alone. So you just feel an overall sense right now of confidence to varying degrees across all the sports, I feel like.
I mean, if you're looking at South Carolina athletics as a whole, you got to be excited. There's so much to be excited about between, like you were saying, the baseball and the softball programs, baseball going crazy in the transfer portal, softball coming off a run that honestly they probably didn't imagine having this year in the best way possible. And then obviously, the women's basketball team, kind of holding that standard now, being the next UConn. There are players that want to come and want to, negotiate. So it's honestly very refreshing to see so many people talking about South Carolina, wanting to be involved in the program, buying into what they're doing, because it's only going to, spruce up the entire athletics department going forward. Just a lot of national recognition just over the course of this year. I don't think at the beginning of this season we would have thought that game day was going to be so excited to cover USC football versus LSU. And I mean, that game, arguably the Gamecocks should have won that game, which if you looked at the schedule going into that season before, nobody was expecting that to happen. So a lot of great things to talk about, especially going into 2025.
And as we kind of zero in on football here, the vibes of the offseason have been pretty good for the most part. Now, there's the sense of the unknown, which we talk about a lot of, okay, you're replacing a lot of talent, especially on the defensive side of the football. What's that going to look like this upcoming year? But I always defer to this. This is the point in time where you always have to put your faith in the coaching staff, right? That, A, they're going to be able to go out there and get the right pieces to fill in those gaps of what the former players left behind, and 2, they're going to be able to develop guys to get the most out of them. And I think you saw a season ago where, again, Kyle Kennard and Demetrius Knight were good players at their prior stops, but nobody saw them becoming what they became here at South Carolina. And again, that's where you look at the coaching staff and say, wow, whatever these guys did allowed these guys to shine brighter than we ever saw from them. And that's what your hope is. And again, going back to that word confidence, that's where your confidence is within the coaching staff that, hey, I don't know a lot about some of these guys they brought in or guys that have been sitting with those guys, what they did with the prior guys last year.
Yeah, and it's interesting you kind of bring up on the defensive side of the ball. I think Rocket Sanders was a great example of a player that, was also very good, but came to South Carolina and kind of, really blossomed into, an NFL prospect type of player. And, when you see moves that are made last week, like picking up the former running back from Colorado last week, it only makes you more excited, hoping that, bringing in talent, somebody that's played with somebody like Travis Hunter the year before can, leave an even bigger legacy now that they're kind of moving to another team and laying out that extra part in their career. So a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, a lot of confidence, again, here locally when it comes to South Carolina and specifically football, coming off the heels of a very strong 9-win campaign a year ago. And, there's certainly a lot of programs in the SEC, Georgia, Texas, teams like that I feel are probably feeling pretty similar and pretty confident, but it doesn't go for everyone. I think there's a good handful of teams in the conference right now that are probably suffering through the summertime, kind of worried about what lies ahead. And I look at a program like Kentucky, right? It was only a couple years ago that Mark Stoops was potentially in line to get the A&M job and ends up staying in Kentucky, and it hasn't been great since then. And I think he goes in this season on a hot seat. And look, you're at a basketball school. You don't have to accomplish a lot as a football program, but he's performing underneath that standard of what they think that program should be, and that's probably got people less than excited about what's coming up this fall for Kentucky football.
Yeah, like I said, the SEC it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. It's an NFL factory. It's a lot of homegrown talent and talent just from all over the country coming in and out. But I think the SEC is, quite honestly, a little bit of a sneak peek each year into kind of what the draft class for the next NFL season is almost always going to be now going forward. And I just think that, if you kind of fall off the curve, if you're not an 8-9 win team in the SEC, you're almost a little bit irrelevant.
Well, one team that was a 9-win team a year ago was University of Alabama, first year under Kalen DeBoer. And, talking about the confidence thing, I kind of go back and forth because I don't really know, right? And we've talked to some Alabama insiders, and there's optimism, obviously, but the confidence that this coach can bring you to the heights that your prior coach had, that's asking a lot, right? And look, a 9-4 season for most programs is phenomenal. For Alabama, that's underachieving. And you're changing your quarterback situation. You've obviously lost a lot of talent to the draft. Once again, I don't know how high the confidence vibes are in Tuscaloosa right now for year number 2 under Kalen DeBoer. Yeah, they're probably not as confident as they typically are just because of the standard, this program is kind of set for itself. But they've also got a lot of young talent. I mean, the wide receiver who was, I think, 17, 18, I'm totally blanking on his name right now. Ryan Williams.
Yes.
Yep.
Guys like that are, sometimes it just takes one off season, 2 off seasons to become, a top tier player in the top player in the NCAA, and then eventually moving on to the NFL. So I think, Kevin DeBoer, first season, big shoes to fill, filling the role of Nick Saban. So I'd be curious to see how he kind of makes adjustments in year 2, but if they're not good, it's not going to look great. And then I go to another team that, again, very successful season last year in Ole Miss. 9-win regular season. We're right there with South Carolina and Alabama in terms of being on the cut line for the playoff, and just end up, coming up a little bit short there. But, they had the maybe one of the more talented rosters in all the country last year. Obviously paid a very nice price for it in the process, and then underachieved with it. Didn't make the playoff. Lost some inexcusable games in the process there to teams like Florida and teams like Kentucky. So I don't know where the confidence for a program like that is, given the fact that you can't guarantee this year's roster is better than last year's, and how can you expect to achieve more than that one did a year ago when the most talented roster maybe you've ever had comes up short? Yeah, situations like that sometimes can be tough, but you can't necessarily blame it on, like, if you have a lot of talent on one roster, but it all doesn't kind of gel together, that's arguably more frustrating than, when you don't have the talent and you don't deliver. I mean, I feel like we've seen this example in the NBA at least twice with the Lakers putting together Steve Nash and Dwight Howard with Kobe Bryant. That was a dumpster fire. Everyone thought that team was going to win at least 2-3 championships. And then another team that also kind of did that was the Warriors before, Curry became Stephen Curry in 2010. That team had Curry, Monte Ellis, and then former first overall pick Andrew Bogut, who arguably kind of looked like a bust until they won a ring. But I mean, those are two examples. I feel like you had a lot of great talent in one spot, and because, you couldn't get the pieces to really gel together, it took away from the fact that you had a lot of talented pieces there.
Yeah, definitely so. And I think, as we especially go into this new era of revenue sharing and all that kind of stuff, we're obviously going to look at the number figures when it comes to certain teams. Again, Ohio State had the most expensive roster seemingly in college football a year ago. Looks like Texas is going to have the most expensive one this upcoming year. Ole Miss obviously in the mix with both those schools in these 2 years respectively. But at the end of the day, still got to go out there and execute. And sometimes even the $1 million quarterback or $1 million great defensive player can be bested by somebody that isn't worth half the same value. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the reality of sports that I think may keep it from just being about the money at the end of the day when it comes to, okay, well, it's just always going to be the team with the most expensive rosters playing for the national championship and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think Ole Miss was an example last year that may not always end up being the case at the end of the day.
I mean, that's the biggest risk in sports. People shoveling out millions and millions of dollars, hoping that it's going to work, but there's never that guarantee. And, sometimes when you do put the money in, sometimes it does pay out, and it's great. We looked at last year's World Series, the two most expensive rosters, arguably in the MLB, going head-to-head, and it was pretty entertaining. But everyone was excited to see that happen because you were like, you have the two biggest pots of talent, right there playing on the biggest stage. So when you get a scenario like that, I think everybody's excited, but that is the risk in sports. I feel like half the time, the most expensive rosters don't necessarily always pan out.
Absolutely. We'll jump back into the NBA Finals coming up next, discuss what happened on Friday night in game number 4, and look ahead to game number 5 coming up tonight as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head and Sam Shapiro along with you on your Monday here on The Game.
Thunder a chance to take the lead. Alexander on the drive, pulls back, baseline jumper's good. OKC with their first lead of the second half. And a timeout call from Indiana. 29 points. Clutch buckets from the NBA MVP.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro along with you here on your Monday on the Game. That was the call on Friday night as the Oklahoma City Thunder, courtesy of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, taking the lead there in the fourth quarter and not surrendering it as they would go on to win the game 111-104 and not the series up. And we were actually watching this game at the same place, and I remember looking up and seeing that Indy had the 10-point lead there in the second half, and I'm like, wow, it looks like they may be well on their way to bump this out to a 3-1 series lead, which, again, not impossible, but very, very hard to overcome. And then, boom, Oklahoma City goes on the crazy run, SGA with 15 points in the fourth quarter, and suddenly we have a tie series.
I mean, have teams changed approaching games, like just being more aggressively towards the second half? Because I feel like, at least watching Indiana in the conference finals and here, whenever they are more aggressive in the second half versus the first half, they tend to come out on top when whichever team is kind of rolling into the second half with more momentum kind of pulls out more.
Sure.
And I feel like we didn't always see that like before, especially like some of the series the Thunder were in the beginning of the year. Like they were blowing Memphis out by 50, 60 points in some of those games. And it wasn't even close for the majority of it. You look at this game 4, I mean, OKC, this is kind of really the first game it took them to actually start, get it going into the second half. I feel like at least the first 3 games, they had an 8 to 12 point lead going into halftime. But this one, I mean, even if you look at Shai Gilgeous, his points per quarter, he kind of got ramped up throughout the game, scoring 15 of that 35 in the fourth alone, and then they end the game on a 12-1 run. So it's just very, it seems like a late man's game, at least in this postseason, if that makes sense.
And you alluded to it. Oklahoma City's had the best point differential of anybody in the league so far this year. And again, they're looked at as, especially if they cap it off with a NBA Finals championship, it looked at as one of the best teams of all time in terms of how they played and the way they dominated their opponents. Again, they're not used to kind of being in these rock fights. And I think they learned their lesson the hard way in game number 1, where Indiana comes back and it's like, oh, okay, this is what this team's capable of. And when the shoe ends up being on the other foot and they have to kick it into another gear after being down, they were able to do that, right? And again, it's not a situation they were in a whole lot this year. So I think they had to almost kind of discover that within themselves to some degree. And now that they proved that they could do that, they can come back on their own and win a game like that. I mean, you got to feel like the momentum shifted back to their side, right?
Now being home, it's definitely going to help. And that they still play Chesapeake Arena, I believe. I'm not entirely sure, but
what's the name of it? I forget the name now.
That's okay. Anyway, the environment is like, at first I didn't really understand, and then I heard Kendrick Perkins go, playing in front of a crowd like that is different, and even watching...
It's the Paycom Center.
The Paycom Center, right. So just playing in an environment like that, I mean, you just have a sea of blue screaming the entire time. And look, this is a very young roster in general. So if they don't come out on top in this one, I mean, you're going against Rick Carlisle, who's a veteran, experienced coach, been in this position before, has been up against one of the toughest postseason teams in years past with LeBron and Miami's big 3 that year. So you can't counter roster out like that. But this has just been, like you were saying with the point differentiation, when you have a young team kind of come into a platform like the finals like that. Regular season games, when you're up 10 or 12, sometimes teams don't necessarily have what it takes to put the gas on with the last 5 minutes into the fourth quarter. Well, it's the NBA Finals, and you have a veteran coach that knows how to kind of wiggle your way through those games. Now it's kind of a different story. So I think, like you were saying in game 1, it was kind of a learning lesson. Oh, even though we're up 12 points,
sure,
you're not really up 12 points.
And I think about this from the Indiana perspective and the quote of, if you come for the king, you best not miss. I think rings true right here because, again, you had a chance to get yourself to 3-1, which, again, not impossible to overcome because we've seen it happen before, but would be a pretty big mountain, if anything, for Oklahoma City to climb, to have to be perfect the rest of the way in order to win the series. Now you've tied it up. Now they've tied it up 2 games to 2, and again, you're going back to Oklahoma City. That's a tough ask for Indiana to try and rekindle that momentum. That being said, though, they are really, really good coming off of losses. They've not lost a game. They've not lost back-to-back games since, I think, March, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a while. So maybe this is right where they need to be or want to be. You know what I mean? But they really had a chance to step on their throats on Friday night, and they didn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, going into tonight's game, you're up 3-1. Indiana's probably the favorite for the first time this entire series. And, now that they didn't kind of have that opportunity to really take a lot of the momentum, that's not saying OKC couldn't have went home and won too, but it's a lot harder to then have to go and win, 4 games in a row. Yeah, 4 games in a row. Can't do math. 4 games in a row to try to, edge them out versus now you kind of have a little cushion wiggle room. Even if you give up that 1 game, you only got to win 2 more, and then you win in 7.
How would you rate the series as a whole so far?
Because of the lack of aura or just, feeling that it's a championship game, I think in comparison to, years past finals, it's not as exciting. But I do think the level of play between, Halliburton, SGA, and both teams' supporting casts have been very exciting to watch. One thing that I really liked about this postseason is the methods of scoring are a lot more diverse and different than I feel like we've seen the last 2-3 seasons, where you either have, whether it was Giannis or Jokic down low with the fast break slams, or, you have guards running around the 3-point line, chucking up threes. We had, Curry kind of annihilate the Celtics the other year, and then the Celtics were back in it the year prior, also making it rain. So it's just nice to kind of see a mix of, some mid-range game, Halliburton, SGA, kind of, I feel like, almost normalizing the mid-range shot. Anthony Edwards was kind of doing that before the T-Wolves got, booted. But I was watching these highlights, and I was just thinking to myself, like, they're taking different types of shots throughout the entire game. They're not just running around the 3-point line or looking for the pick-and-roll alley-oop slam. So that has definitely made this more exciting than I feel like the last couple finals. But I wish the finals feeling was truly there.
I will say there is something fun about a series where you can't count out either team at any point in the game. And again, Indiana's comeback that's, been a persistent thing they've done throughout the entire playoffs so far always gives you a reason to keep your eye on. Even when they lost game number 2, by a pretty convincing margin, I'm still watching that in the last, 2 minutes. You never know. You never know. They've shown it before. They can come back. It keeps you engaged and keeps you watching. And again, Oklahoma City, who hasn't been put in a lot of those situations themselves, did the exact same thing on Friday night. Hey, it looked like Indiana had the game in control, and boom, in the final minute or final couple minutes there, Oklahoma City is able to take the lead and complete the comeback. So it gives you a reason to stay locked in the entire time, right? Where, look, there have been plenty of other finals before and plenty of other series in the playoffs where, it was just a blowout. And okay, I can turn this off the middle of the third quarter and not feel like I'm going to miss something in terms of the other team coming back. But these two teams offer you something different. These two teams are going to keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end. And again, we had game number 5 tonight to determine who gets the momentum or who gets the lead back in terms of the series overall, and see if we're maybe headed for 7 potentially.
Yeah, and I think both of these teams have a good, a wholesome storyline if they do win. I mean, Oklahoma City kind of redeeming the arc that a lot of, their fans that, had the pleasure of watching, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, in their early 20s, kind of do the same thing this team is doing right now, lose to, a juggernaut in the Miami Heat that year. This would be the ultimate redemption arc, I feel like, for that team, just because you have another super talented young roster that can, get to a big stage like that.
Sure.
So, if they win, that's the ultimate redemption arc, in my opinion. And then the Pacers kind of have one of their own, redeeming what Reggie Miller couldn't do when he was there. So just seeing them kind of cap that off, especially with a coach like Carlisle kind of leading the charge, especially because, Halliburton kind of was the kid who got the A on the group project that didn't really contribute anything to the group project. It'd be nice for him to kind of quash some of the overrated, speak about him, just because, I mean, he's an NBA champion. You can't call him you can't call him that overrated at that much at that point. So I'd be happy for Halliburton. I'll be happy for Carlisle if the Pacers win. But, I mean, OKC being that young and winning, I mean, that would be the ultimate redemption arc. So I think both teams have a great storyline for W.
Game number 5 coming tonight, 8:30 tip on ABC. Game number 6 will be on Thursday, and if necessary, game number 7 would come on Sunday. That'd be back in Oklahoma City as well. Wait, who sprung a leak? Brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. Coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head and Sam Shapiro on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back, and it is the Extra Point. It's all right. Sam Shapiro along with you on your Monday here on the game. It is time for Who Sprung a Leak, brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. Despite the fact they did win the third game of the series, Colorado Rockies did drop the first two to the Atlanta Braves. And after Saturday's game, which was the 70th game of the season for the Rockies, they set a new MLB record as they had the fewest wins through 70 games since the 1899 Cleveland Spiders. At that point in time, they were 13-70, obviously, 13-57. Picked up a 14th win yesterday, but obviously this is a organization that is down in the dumps right now, has been for a while. And when you start setting records that haven't been touched since before the 1900s, you're in a bad place.
Kind of looks like they're in a league of their own almost, just because the cutoff, like you were saying, the last time a team has only gone through their first 70 games was 1884. So what happened, I guess, in that whole 1900 span? Everybody won, I guess, more than 15, 16, 17 games. So, I mean, I don't know. When you have leadership with your team also saying, we don't care, there's nothing we can do about it, quote, end quote, it's also kind of like, you can't even appreciate the belt of mountains behind you while you're watching your team lose in Colorado,
And that's the interesting thing to me is the Rockies have been bad for a while. And I remember I was back when I was in elementary school was the last time that they, made it to the World Series. And that was a couple years after actually the Montforts took over ownership back in 2005, but I very much think the team that went to the World Series, was that back in 2007, I believe, was still made up a lot of what was left over from the prior ownership group. Since then, they've only been to the playoffs 3 times, most recently back in 2018, and there's no signs of them getting back anytime soon. Again, legitimately the worst team in baseball to a historical standpoint, as of right now. And I think about when you're a fan of these kind of teams, and in baseball, you have the A's, you have the Rockies, you have the Pittsburgh Pirates, they're just never, ever going to win unless the philosophy or ownership in general just changes. So I don't know why, outside of, hey, I'm just going to go to the ballpark and hang out and drink some beer or whatever. Like, why do you keep supporting these teams? Why do these teams still have fans even when you know it's not going to change?
I think that's a really good question that a lot of fans wouldn't necessarily have the answer to. I mean, for example, I've unfortunately rooted for the New York Jets my whole life, which I feel like are one of those teams, at least in football, have been notoriously not great. But I feel like a lot of these fans that have been entrenched for years, like the Chicago White Sox, great example.
Yeah.
Historically bad season last year, but won the World Series in 2005, one of the best seasons in MLB history. So I think it's little anecdotal examples, here and there where you get stuff like that keeps you hanging on. Like the Cubs, another good. Well, now the Cubs are a little bit better, but they were pretty bad for a long time up until they went on that World Series run and won their first World Series in over a century. But there are little anecdotal things, and even if it's just father and pop going to your first baseball game, football game, whatnot. At this point, that's probably what's keeping the fans in the Colorado Rockies fan base hanging around right now, because I don't think, beer and a scenic view is going to do that, at least for a 13-win team 70 games into your season.
And baseball doesn't have a spending cap, which allows the disparity between the teams at the top, like the Dodgers and the Yankees, and the teams toward the bottom, like the Rockies, like the A's, to be so worlds apart in what they're paying for their talent and what those teams are paying for their talent. And again, you can get a Rockies team or something that's theoretically made up of a lot of young guys that kind of start clicking, but as soon as those guys' first contracts are up, they're not going to be there anymore because they're not going to be willing to pay them what they're worth, and they'll go be an all-star at some kind of other team. And kind of tying this back to college football a little bit, yes, we still have this new revenue sharing, $20.5 million and all that kind of stuff that's going into effect on July the 1st, but NIL is still going to be a thing. And with NIL, you have the ability to spend as much as you want on your roster. So there's seemingly still not a cap in college football anymore either. And I almost kind of wonder as time goes along, because again, we're 4 years into the NIL era. I know it seems like it's been longer, but it's only been 4 years, going back to 2021. As time goes on, will we see this kind of crazy gap between the top in like Power 4 college football and the very bottom of the bottom. To a degree, I think it's kind of there anyway. But when you talk about the money aspect of it, I think that gap could grow even larger.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I think when you have gaps like that continue to pull apart, eventually they just, if they become big and powerful enough, they become their own entity. But I don't see, the better teams in the MLB necessarily becoming, either a league of their own or just kind of being separate. But I think it would be beneficial to maybe find a way to at least give some of those teams at the bottom a little bit more flexibility, not necessarily taking away from the teams at the top, but if you give those teams at the bottom a little more flexibility, then they at least kind of stand more of a fighting chance.
Well, and going back to baseball here, there's not a salary floor. There's not a minimum standard of you have to spend X amount in baseball. If you want to be as cheap as possible, you can be as cheap as possible. You're going to lose a lot of games, but there's nothing to tell you that you have to spend a certain amount on your talent. And again, you'd have to go through a lot of red tape and a lot of, hoops to jump through to make that kind of thing happen. But in terms of making baseball more competitive from top to bottom, I feel like it would need something like that, right? Because, again, it's a foregone conclusion. The Rockies are the worst team. And, yeah, they're going to win some games between now and the end of the season, but they're not going to be worth anything. And every time you see them on their schedule, you can almost count that as a series victory. Whereas in football, obviously is a different sport, you can tune into any NFL Sunday, and the Browns can be 0-11, and they can knock off the 11-0, Chiefs, right? Because football is just that kind of sport, and the gap between the top and the bottom isn't nearly as great as what you have in baseball, and to a degree in basketball as well.
So do you think they should create some sort of, you need to spend X amount of money just so you're at least kind of pushing towards making your team? Because I also feel like when you're drafting players, especially in the MLB, it's not necessarily as easy to tank for that one player that's going to change your whole team. Like when the Angels had Mike Trout, he was the best player in the MLB for a few seasons, but that didn't mean, the Angels were going to go to the World Series.
Sure.
So it like the whole tanking philosophy there to me doesn't make as much sense as it would in, the NFL or the NBA.
And in baseball, tanking isn't quite as effective because there's not a guarantee that that person is going to be able to make it to your club. And for then, it can take a couple years. Like I know, like you look at a guy like Paul Skeens, which skirted his way through the minors pretty quickly and got up to the major leagues, in less than a year's time. But that doesn't happen every single time. There has been, you can go through it, the number one overall pick in the MLB draft year by year. You can look at that, and there's going to be a lot of names on there. You're like, who the heck is that guy? Because either he did make it to the club and flamed out pretty quickly, or he just never got himself out of the minors or stuck around long enough to really live up to that billing. So in baseball, you can't quite do that the same way. Like in football, okay, we suck. If we tank, we're going to get the best quarterback available in the draft, and he's going to lead us to new heights. Like that, again, with the way the NFL is structured, and they could change that themselves if they wanted to go with like a draft lottery to avoid those kind of things. But the way the NFL is set up and the way football is, one player like that can turn things around pretty quickly. Baseball's not quite the same way.
Yeah, and my thing also, too, with baseball is you have examples of people like Kyler Murray, the Athletics using a pretty high pick for him that year and then doesn't even go and play baseball at all.
Sure.
I don't know. I would not want to tank and then find out my player decided, oh, actually, I'm a two-sport athlete, and I'm going to go play the other sport after you drafted me. I know it's not, a bigger scope of it, but, it is. We've seen it happen before. And another example, too, was Deion Sanders tried to play both at once and definitely made the Braves a little bit unhappy. Falcons weren't necessarily super happy either, but, I mean,
it still blows my mind that he was able to pull that off, by the way.
That was insane.
Because I think about the logistics of just playing one sport and what all that goes into that, and not to be playing two at the same time, coincided with each other during the season, especially as the Braves were making their deep postseason runs. That's incredible.
It was interesting because when I watched the documentary, a lot of the overtone of it was that what he did was selfish. And I mean, yes and no. At the time, yes, but now when we look back on it, I wouldn't say it was, just because of the historic impact it had. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see a player or an athlete ever be able to do that again and play at a decently high level in both games. So that was, it could be an anomaly.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever see it again. And again, with how hyper focused and specialized each sport has become to a degree, I don't think you can split your time at that level still doing that and being able to be good enough. That's why Deion was such a unicorn, unique kind of person that he could play and Bo Jackson did it as well back in the day as well, to play both sports at a high enough level to be a pro.
So it's like, I feel like, we'll get older and tell our kids about this and they'll just be like, how is that possible? Like the prospects we see now devote their entire lives, all this money, all this training, all this into one sport. So it's crazy to just think that, there are a couple players or, unicorns out there that I could just walk onto a field and play both.
Yeah, absolutely. Crazy stuff. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour. Caitlin Clark is back in the fold for the WNBA, and the league's got to be thrilled about it because the ratings are back up. We'll discuss that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Sam Shapiro on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra point. It's all right. Sam Shapiro wrapping up hour number 2. Sam, would you say Caitlin Clark's a big deal in the WNBA?
Just a little bit.
A little bit?
Just a little bit.
Well, she had missed 5 games with an injury. Returned on Saturday to help the Fever win against the Liberty 102-88. She had 32 points in 31 minutes in return, kind of got right back on track to where she left off. And I think it might go without saying, the WNBA is thrilled to have her back because she's been out since May the 24th with that quad injury. Since then, nationally televised games are down 55% in viewership just over those course of a couple weeks. Like, the way she moves the needle for this league is insane, right?
It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. And I actually remember over the weekend watching highlights from, her handing the Liberty their first loss of the year. I mean, there was, I think, a 33-second span to end the second quarter, I believe, where she hit back-to-back-to-back threes, and each one was farther, closer to the logo than the last one. I mean, there's nobody else, and there are very few players in the NBA that are doing that.
Yeah.
That are just running up to the three-point line and just heaving it. And, I mean, she is making elementary school basketball look like it's easy. And some of these shots she's taking are incredible. I mean, it makes sense why she's driving so much viewership.
Sure.
And alluding back to your point, picking back up right where she left off. She's the first player in WNBA history to start the first 5 games of her season with 100 points, 30 rebounds, and 30 assists. Coming into this game, dropping 30+. I mean, it makes sense.
By the way, the games that she has been in prior to returning on Saturday have averaged about 1.8 million viewers. The games that she missed averaged only about 850,000 viewers. Literally a difference of 1 million people watching a game on average when she's playing versus when she's not. And look, there's plenty of superstars around the other leagues. Aaron Judge for the Yankees in baseball, Patrick Mahomes for, the NFL with the Chiefs. Again, LeBron, Steph, these guys in the NBA, to name a few. But I don't think anybody is carrying the weight of overall interest in the league quite as much as Caitlin Clark is doing right now. And you'd be hard-pressed to say this kind of thing will ever happen again. You know what I mean? Again, there's a lot of people that tune into the NBA because of LeBron. But when he retires, I don't think the ratings are suddenly going to just plummet all of a sudden. They'll be down a little bit, especially when it comes to Laker games and stuff like that, but they're not going to completely fall off a cliff just because he's not playing anymore.
Right, and even when we saw players like Michael Jordan, when Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant retired, we didn't see viewership, nearly get cut in half. Jordan a little bit, it kind of declined over the course of, a couple decades, but to your point, not this quickly to this magnitude. I'm hoping that, as more talented players come into the WNBA, like Paige Beckers, that, are doing, incredible things on the court.
Sure.
You're not seeing that blow get taken as much just because, it's a growing league and there are a lot of talented players besides Caitlin Clark. But based on what she's doing, I'm not entirely surprised either.
That's the hope that the WNBA has is, okay, you're coming in to see Caitlin Clark, but while you're here, check out Paige Beckers. Check out, if you don't know about Aja Wilson, watch her. Caitlin Clark's the one that brings you in the door. They want you to have another reason to stick around, whether it be supporting your local team or just finding another player that, hey, if Caitlin Clark's out with an injury, you're going to want to watch these other games anyway. That's the hope is. And again, that takes time. That's not something that's going to happen overnight. And again, she's only in her second year in the WNBA, but it is just insane to see the differences viewership-wise when she's playing and when she's not, and just the pure effect she's having on the game right now.
Well, hopefully her driving the needle will kind of set the stage for, the future generations to kind of lay a much bigger foundation than she already kind of has. You have so many talented players even too. You said Aja Wilson, Breanna Stewart, players that have been playing this game for so long and doing great things, and it's just kind of been overlooked just because of, I feel like, other Power 5 sports or other programs or whatnot. So when you have players like Caitlin Clark really driving the needle, when you have more eyes, you have more money. And when you have more money, you can really expand what the entirety of the league can do and not just her. So it's nice what she's doing for the sport, alone, but I'm hoping that it's going to set the stage for a lot of other players and teams coming forward.
Absolutely. That'll do it for the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Monday here on the game. 11 o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris all in the studio together today. No camps this week, guys? Anything else going on?
Later on.
Yeah, there's
Later
camps.
on?
Yep.
Okay,
Later on.
not today.
Not today. There's actually so the coaches don't have today off because I believe they started youth camp today.
Do the coaches ever have a day off?
Well, during the first 23 days, I guess, of June or so, they don't. But yeah, we're not gonna cover like sixth grade recruiting. So
Hey, class of 2034, man, you never know. Guys, start getting eyes on them soon.
The hilarious thing is, like, I'm sure there will be some kids out there that will get one day recruited by South Carolina.
Oh, and we're on. I mean, you joke about 2034, but we're on
29.
29. Yeah. I mean, Cutterwood's brother's out there the other day at camp. He's 2029.
What grade would 2029 be? Is that 7th, 8th grade? Am I thinking correctly?
Well, 26 is senior. So if
Okay.
you work backwards, freshman going into ninth grade.
What is the youngest recruit you've ever actually started monitoring or
Eighth
had on
grade.
your radar? Eighth grade?
Yeah. I don't like to go in. I remember this is
That's
weird.
very rare too.
Yeah. It's a random thing. I remember I had a buddy who actually went to Hannah with me, and he did some work for us at Central. And I specifically remember him emailing me years ago, like, "Hey man, there's this 8th grader at Hannah named Zach Pickens. This guy's going to be a monster, and all that." And he ends up being he was. Yeah. He nailed that one. So yeah, 8th grade or so is generally when it'll probably continue getting younger and younger though.
They have a middle school all-star game now in South Carolina. And here's the thing though. Some of those guys will go on to be incredibly highly recruited. Some of them just got bigger than everybody else early,
Yeah.
We all played ball with probably guys who, I played ball with the guy, played baseball with the guy. I was like, oh, that guy's going to play in Major League Baseball. Easy. And I think he barely played college ball.
Yeah. I think every rec department had their Babe Ruth that was 10 times better than everybody else. And, that's what makes you when you watch Major League Baseball or whatever sport at the professional level, wow, all those guys were that guy, maybe even 10 times better than that. That's how hard it is to get to climb to the top, for sure.
Or some of them weren't even that good when they were,
True.
younger and kind of, I'm sure they were all pretty good, but not like superstars. And then they just developed, got bigger, got faster. Did y'all have any Danny Almonte? Wasn't that his name?
Yes. What year was that with him?
That was a long time ago, dude. And he was just dominant in the Little League World Series, and then it came out that
he's 3 years older than everybody.
Yes,
we had a guy, and I ended up playing on the high school team with him, named Drew Bowen, and he was a monster in rec league. In high school, he was good, but wasn't good enough to play at the college level. But again, I guess he just I don't know, he probably hit his growth spurt for all of us and threw harder than all of us, hit the ball farther than everybody, and I guess it all balances out at the end of the day at some point.
Yeah, we I to this day don't know the name of this kid, but I remember playing against a guy in All Stars, and I swear he hit 3 home runs in one game, all over the fence, no Little League home runs, just and I was like, who? But the kid looked like he was in high school, and this was Dixie Youth All Stars. So anyway,
Chris, any future superstars you played against?
Not, no, there weren't. I had we were really good. Our middle school football team, which I was not a star on. I barely played. I was tiny.
We can't go back and check. You can lie to us,
No, I won't do that. We had some big dudes, and that was the funny thing. We were really, really good in middle school, and then it's kind of like Wes said, we got to high school, and some of those guys that were just giants.
Sure.
It kind of evened out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we were pretty good in high school, but not great. But no, I don't think any superstars for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's definitely definitely hard to continue to climb there. We'll talk about some camp stuff coming up here in just a second, but we're 76 days away from kickoff. Time for another trivia question. Jack, on Friday, got the trivia question right and opted to split the point between the both of you, so it's still a 3-point advantage.
Such
Chris
a giving
leading
guy.
6-3.
Well, I'm not even going to bring up when you said Jack's name. I had something I was going to bring up. I'm not going to now.
Okay.
What if I give you all the points? Will you bring it up?
I don't want to win like that.
Okay. You can tell me later, off air.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Chris still holding the 3-point advantage. We go back to 1976. The starting quarterback for that team was a featured character in a well-known movie. What was the name of that quarterback in the movie he was featured in? You guys not know this?
Oh, was that
What was his name?
was this Remember the Titans?
Oh,
That's half a point.
Ronnie Bass?
Yep, Ronnie Bass. Wes gets the full point.
just because he did it first.
Yeah. That's how the game works.
Okay.
So now it's a 2-point advantage.
Now, I will not protest because of that, but I thought you literally meant the guy himself starred in the movie.
No.
Okay. At first.
The
but then I
character of Ronnie
Yeah,
Bass
the
is in
character was
movie,
portrayed.
Not the same guy.
I got you.
Yes. Sunshine.
Can you name the childhood actress in that movie who became...
Hayden Panettiere.
Yeah. I'll give you half a point for that one.
I met her. I have a picture with her in my phone.
Yeah,
Met her in Nashville.
What was the story on that?
We were downtown in the Gulch at Peg Leg Porker, great barbecue spot.
Nice.
And the Nashville
Nashville,
cast.
right? Yeah,
in Nashville. And they were hanging out, so we met Hayden Panettiere.
Wow.
Pretty cool. And some other ones.
He was also in Heroes. Remember that show?
In Heroes, yeah. Yep. And then the actress who played April O'Neil in, I think, maybe the original Ninja Turtles movie
Okay.
was also on that show, so she was there. Met her,
Wow.
too. Yeah.
Man.
And some others that y'all be like, I don't know who that is.
When was this?
Oh, it was 15 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
10 years ago, something like that.
Wow.
10 years ago.
Why were they there?
They were
Or they
doing
just-
like a bus tour. Like they would go around on a bus and tweet like during the show, and they just like pulled up to Peg Leg Porker.
This was during Heroes or during a different
During Nashville. The show Nashville.
show?
Hayden Panettiere was on the show Nashville.
right.
They were hanging out in
and
Nashville.
also the mom from Friday Night Lights was on that show, wasn't she?
She was, but she was not there. I would have liked to meet her. Connie Britton. She rules. So that's my story about.
Is that the only?
I don't know how we got there.
Is that the most non-famous non-sports person you've ever met?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat.
I met Waka Flock Flame at the CAE.
I remember you
Lobby.
telling me about Wes. Like
Okay.
I just met Walker. I'm like, what?
He's just hanging out, getting his back checked, or
Funniest thing, well, maybe not the funniest thing ever. That's an oversell. But I'm sitting there. These couple of frat boys were like, kind of just like wowing, like we're excited
yeah.
because they were like taking pictures of this guy. I was like, yeah, who is that over there? And like that's Waka Flock Flame. So it's like, okay, walked over there. He didn't have an entourage. He didn't have,
What year was this?
I don't know, 10 years ago.
Okay.
I mean, he was known.
Yeah, right.
But didn't have an entourage. Probably longer than that, actually. And because he used to come here and perform.
Right.
And there was a guy, Ben G. You remember him? It's like a local rapper.
No.
And I think they were like boys or something. So Waka Flocka Flame would randomly be in Columbia and perform at times. And super, I mean, I'm a short guy, but this guy, super tall. Like,
Yeah,
he's like
big- he's a big
6'5".
guy. Yeah.
Like 6'5". I mean, we took a picture. He was cool. He was just like, yeah, it was, whatever, take it.
Sure.
And by himself, though, that's what surprised me. I would assumed he would have had some people with him.
Yeah. I don't know. That's cool. Just hanging out at CAE.
Yeah, I mean, he was flying on out.
Yeah.
So.
Got to be a background character in a Luke Perry movie once. I guess that's my most famous.
Can we find you?
Celebrity.
Are you like?
Yeah, I'm on screen for like all of 3 seconds.
Really?
Yeah.
What movie?
It's called Good Intentions. It was like a straight to DVD type thing. They
I need to
filmed
go
it.
look this up.
It's on some streaming service somewhere.
So not like Cruel Intentions. You remember that movie?
No,
Movie.
they got I don't remember what the connection was, but my Little League baseball team got to be a part of like a scene in the movie where Luke Perry's son's playing baseball, and we were just I was just in the outfield as the center fielder, just standing there. So
Did you play center field?
Yeah, I played various places in the outfield, but they just kind of had us standing there pretending to play for like 6 hours.
I'm gonna go look that up. I'm gonna be like that Leo DiCaprio meme where he's like pointing.
Yeah,
Tyler's on TV.
I bet I can find it, and I'm out of focus, but I know it's me. But yeah, there's my claim.
Would we know it's you? Like, is it?
I mean,
it's young Tyler.
I was 11, so I mean,
I was able to pick out your picture on the contest over
Baby
here.
Tyler.
So
mine was not hard. I thought honestly that picture of Elijah was you.
that's what
To be
everybody
honest
thought.
with you, I thought like, oh, that's definitely
It's a sore
Chris.
subject for me right now. I was misidentified
Yeah, I mean, it's
many times.
It's
Is that
it's supposed to be a
contest still
challenging
going on?
contest. You know, it was up through Saturday. Yours was the easiest.
But I mean, I gave them a layup. Although one person said it was Dave. So
I'm looking at
Dave must be flattered.
I'm looking at the IMDb page for Good Intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Head on there.
You're not on there.
I'm not on there, but Leanne Rhymes was in that. The lady from The Parent Trap, Elaine Hendricks, she was in that too. There's a couple notable names.
You need to get yourself some credit. Make you an IMDb page. Put your
Maybe I should.
headshot up there.
I got paid $20 for it and got to skip school that day, so it was pretty neat.
Hey, you were that was big
That's
money
nice.
back then, dude.
11
And
years
skipping
old.
school.
Yeah,
I was in a movie. I
Yeah.
got $20. Yeah.
I retired from Hollywood after that.
Just too much.
It's too much. I'll see if I can find a screenshot of it in the break. We'll talk about camp stuff and recruiting coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
All right, guys, you've probably heard of a lot of the clinics that are out there for men, for guys. But Game Day Men's Health, they're a little bit different. They help men reclaim their vitality by optimizing hormone levels. But they are, as I said, a little bit different. They have clinics nationwide that serve men in 48 states all around the U.S., but the one in Columbia, conveniently located in Northeast Columbia near I-77 and 2 Notch Road. They have man cave style clinics. They have in-house labs. So if you're struggling with certain symptoms like fatigue, if you put on unwanted weight, if you've suffered from muscle loss and other things, you can go check them out. GameDayMen'sHealth.com, and you'll be able to type in your zip code. You'll find, again, that location right on 115 Atrium Way. Fast, convenient care. In-house labs deliver your results in just about 15 minutes. Personalized treatment plans in their comfortable man's cave-style clinics. GameDayMen'sHealth.com.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, it's Chris along with you on your Monday here on the game. A little bit of a quieter weekend from a recruiting standpoint as there were no on-campus visitors this past weekend, but one more for closing out the month of June coming up this upcoming weekend, and a lot of big names coming into town, and we are also continuing to monitor the ongoing saga when it comes to Landon Duckworth and where exactly his commitment's going to end up between South Carolina, also visiting Auburn here as of recently, as South Carolina once again trying to get a commitment from the class of 2026 quarterback that was with them a couple of years ago.
Yeah, for sure, man. So no official visitors this past weekend. There were a couple of guys. They had a Saturday camp, so there were some guys rolling through unofficially for that. But, we've talked about it all summer to this point. 3 big official visit weekends. This past weekend is kind of your one that's almost kind of off in terms of no OVs. Then coming into this last one, I don't want to say arguably the biggest one because all 3 have been pretty big, but definitely, Chris, I would say you look ahead to this one, and a lot of guys that if fans follow recruiting, they'll be like, oh, I know that name. You know what I'm saying? Like Samari Matthews, I mean, we maybe have been talking about him since 8th grade. Maybe not quite, but he was an early target for South Carolina. Darius Gray, I mean, that dude's probably been on campus 15-plus times, I feel like, for South Carolina. Feels like he's taken 15-plus official visits, in terms of just going out to various schools as well. Tamarian Watkins, has been a primary target for Carolina for about a year now. Desmond Green was an early offer. So it is a familiar list, and we'll get into that. I want to go where Tyler went, though, with Landon Duckworth. I think he's our guy right now that has captured the attention of the fan base. It was a South Carolina Ole Miss battle, it appeared, for a while. I know you had picked up a little bit saying, hey, it might be Auburn that is the other school with the best chance here. And then, lo and behold, he puts out the official top 2, and it is Auburn that South Carolina's battling with.
Yeah, and he's gotten kind of close to some of the other guys that are either in this class, well, now are in this class. And as an example, I remember talking to Aiden Harris and Andrew Harris last weekend before last. And, of course, they committed to South Carolina in the middle of their official visit on a Saturday. And talking to him when things wrapped up on a Sunday, they revealed a few things saying, hey, we're in a group chat with Landon Duckworth and who, of course, is a target, and then Keenan Britt, who's committed, and Zion Giles, who was an early commitment to South Carolina. And the word after that visit was, Landon was in town that same weekend in Columbia. Hey, it's kind of shaped up to be Auburn-South Carolina battle. That was later verified because Duck released his final 2, and it was those 2 programs. But he's gotten pretty close to a group of guys who are now all committed to the Gamecocks. And he knows some people going to, like, he knows Deuce Knight, who signed with the Tigers last year as a quarterback commitment. So he knows people at both places, but this has been an interesting one because, and I think I told you this when we talked last week, Tyler, when I was out at camp, a lot of times you see a guy decommit from a school. Landon committed to South Carolina so early, you knew that it wasn't going to be over, whether or not he stayed in the class or not.
Yep.
Right, this guy's way too talented not to have a bunch of other schools continue to offer him. And sure enough, he had Ole Miss and Auburn and a bunch of others, knocking on his door. But it's kind of an interesting situation because a lot of times you see a guy decommit from a school and he ends up going somewhere else. Every now and then you see a guy recommit to a school, and that could be how things are tracking here. You look at it. He's taken his officials to Auburn, to South Carolina. It was definitely an eye-opener that he did go back to Auburn late last week for an unofficial visit. That kind of raises your eyebrows a little bit. But it was mentioned by our guys at Auburn Live West, Auburn On 3 site. Landon's publicly saying, hey, I'm considering going back to Columbia again. We're about to hit a dead period, I think June 23rd. Coincides, of course, with this last big visit weekend for South Carolina. He could be back on campus again. And I think there's just a really high comfort level with Duckworth and those close to him when it comes to Shane Beamer's program, the people around it.
What bearing does the current state of the quarterback room have on what his ultimate decision is going to be? And it's interesting that he's deciding between South Carolina and Auburn here, because I think you see similarities in both, where Lenore Sellers, obviously, if he plays good enough, can obviously go on the NFL after this season. Jackson Arnold also in his third year in college, taking over there at Auburn. They have Ashton Daniels transferring over from Stanford, who's an older guy, and will be out pretty quickly there. But Deuce Knight is a freshman going in there at Auburn this upcoming season. You obviously have two young guys in Aaron Nolan and Cutter Woods already in the program here at South Carolina. And look, it's so hard to project what a quarterback's room's going to look like a year from now, let alone 2 or 3. But when you're looking at a guy like this coming in for the next cycle, how much does that matter in what decision he's going to make?
Yeah, I don't know, man. You can weigh in too, Chris. I don't get the impression that it's too big of a factor here just because, you look over at Auburn and they have Deuce Knight, like you said, coming in, and this is a kid that they are incredibly high on. I think most people think Deuce Knight is coming into that Auburn program, to be the guy sooner rather than later. Now, Auburn is trying to sell him. I thought this was kind of interesting. You look at that interview. It's almost like they're selling him on, like, learning behind Deuce Knight a little bit.
For 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, it's like he's 1 year ahead of him.
Right.
So, I don't that's an interesting, and that may not have been from the article. I think that might have been something that Wiltfong put out, and in his latest thing on what he's hearing on the Auburn side. I think it's in that latest Wiltfong whip around, which is the thing he does just with little quick hitters on multiple prospects around the country. And, here's the thing. The word has kind of gotten out about, Lenoris, but also the fact that Lenoris could leave after this year. So most of these top quarterbacks, I do think, just speaking generally, they kind of take notice if a guy is entrenched. They typically don't really seem to worry about competition if it's a guy who's a young backup. So is there a little advantage for Carolina in that, I think locally there's a lot of people very high on Cutter Woods in Columbia. But from a national standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, here's a 4-star, borderline 5-star guy like Deuce Knight versus Cutter, that may be lean to South Carolina as an advantage just from a perception standpoint. But, Duckworth, I don't know. I feel like this one is kind of about relationships. And there's a couple of things at play there. For one, Beamer didn't switch up on the kid when he decommitted. And two, I almost get the impression that he was a more important target for Shula than he even was for Dow Loggins. Obviously, Dow was recruiting him, was recruiting some other guys too. It really, remember, Chris, we were hearing, even when they were recruiting kind of those 2 or 3 or 4 guys in this class, it was, man, Landon's the one that Shula wants. And so I think he and Shula have just hit it off incredibly well. And I think it's a little bit beyond your typical, you'll hear us say something like, oh, this guy's built a good relationship. He's recruited him hard. I think those two guys have really connected. I think if he goes to Auburn, it's going to be just because it's Auburn, it's closer, blah, 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 blah. If he goes to South Carolina, it's going to be because Shula and the staff have a better relationship with him than I believe Auburn does.
Yeah, and, it's not like Jackson, Alabama is, what's that town, Opelika? It's not right beside it. It's 3 hours away, And I think you made a great point. There is, again, Landon and those close to him who are involved in this thing, they really like the people around South Carolina. I think there's a very high trust level there. And I think the staff's done a really good job with that because not only is Dow Loggins no longer on staff, but the guy that got Duckworth committed was Jody Wright. Jody Wright has ties to Jackson, Alabama. The head coach at Murray State wasn't on staff last season. So you got to think about it. The guy who recruited you and the OC who was there when you were recruited, when you committed originally, are no longer there. And to your point, Wes, Beamer has stayed incredibly consistent And when Mike Shula came in, now Shula was already on staff, right? He was promoted, so there's some familiarity, but he picked up that relationship and really ran with it. So this is a guy that's been a huge priority for South Carolina. Another thing about Auburn, guys, they got Jackson Arnold, who's not just a one-year guy in terms of what he has from an eligibility standpoint.
Right.
So he's got, I think, 2 years left if he wants them. So a lot at play there, but I think there are some signs that are encouraging in terms of how this thing's shaping up for the Gamecocks.
Some would certainly follow as the week goes along, and last recruiting visit weekend coming up this upcoming weekend for the month of June. A lot of activity in the transfer portal for Gamecock baseball. We'll touch on that coming up next as the hour rolls along. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. All right, folks, Tyler told you earlier, 76 days until football. That means go ahead. It's time to go ahead and start upgrading that man cave. Hit up our friends at Integrated Media, integratedmediainc.com, or give them a call, 803-948-8327. Go to that website. You're going to see all about their many different services. But what I'm going to tell you about today is, of course, upgrading either the home theater, maybe just your living room setup, or maybe you're going all in on a man cave as well. They can come out, hang your TV, set everything up, surround sound, make sure it's exactly what you want. And then, of course, a lot of us have cut the cords. You're doing streaming these days. You want to make sure on game day there's not going to be any buffering. You're going to get a great picture with no hesitation whatsoever. And they're going to make sure that your internet is set up perfectly for all that streaming. IntegratedMediaInc.com, again, is that website, 803-948-8327. Hit them up today. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris with you on your Monday here on the game. The three of us haven't really got to talk about this a whole lot here as of late, but South Carolina baseball very, very active in the transfer portal so far this offseason. Of course, coming away from the year, we knew that Coach Maneri was frustrated with the level of talent that he had on the team. And we're expecting some big changes in the offseason, seemingly a bigger budget to work with, according to Jeremiah Donati. And they've gone out there and have made a lot of moves in the portal so far. We're into the double digits now in terms of guys they've brought in. So this team going to look very, very different than it did this past season, which, again, when you have historically terrible season like South Carolina had, changing as much up as possible may end up being the best option.
Yeah, for sure. I think we all anticipated that certainly there were going to be big numbers. It was, all right, okay, can you get enough difference makers? And, you know, I think certainly they've done a good job. I think a lot of people, rightfully so, are still a little bit wait and see. You have to now take the talent and put these guys in a position to succeed. You know, I saw one of their returning guys, Jake McCoy, had a fantastic start, was getting a lot of buzz online for what he did in his summer league. So I think, to me, when I start to look at this roster, the guys coming in, you're still going to need a few guys to step up and step into kind of those ace SEC weekend roles if this team is going to be good. But in terms of the lineup, in terms of bringing in guys that have kind of that resume, that back of the baseball card, and that they've done some things at a high level, and in a lot of cases actually against good competition too, you got to be impressed with what they've done. This website, 64 Analytics, which they're everywhere now. I don't feel like I even had heard of them a year ago, but now they're everywhere. As of Sunday, they have South Carolina's portal class ranked number 2 in the country. So certainly on paper, they have been going out and getting guys who can come in and help you play or help you compete, I should say. And you know, we'll see. What the most recent commit, at least publicly, is Reese Moore from Iowa, who was an all Big Ten guy. He's a catcher, but he also DHs, maybe plays some outfield too. But just as another bat that comes in and potentially looks like somebody who can help you a lot.
That's one. I mean, there are several intriguing guys on here. By the way, Jack Veltri on Gamecock Central has a nice little handy table you can go look at. It's complete with names, stats, all that good stuff. But if you're looking just at the hitters, what is it so far? 7 hitters that have come in. Cullen Horowitz pitched and hit for his team last year. But you got some guys that they got to do it here. I know. You don't have to tweet or send us a text on the Firehouse Subs text line. You can say, well, they got to do it here. I get that. When you get a transfer, when you get a high school prospect, they all got to come here and do it. But the numbers are impressive. You know, Ethan Lozama, 336, 15 homers last year. Like, he can hit, you know. But and there are a few of those. But Reese Moore is very intriguing to me because this is a guy that has performed at a high level at Iowa at a position that, now you got a lot of needs, but that was a big one last year. You know, the catcher position kind of went into the season a bit unsettled. When LeCroy went out, it was certainly unsettled. Mm-hmm. You got Gavin Braylon back as a young guy who's, I think, going to continue to get bigger, continue to get better. But you're bringing in a guy who has proven himself at the college level, playing at a high level. I think that's a really good get for them.
We talk about this all the time, like, you know, with football recruiting, okay, you know, not every single 5-star is going to pan out and become a superstar player, but if you have an entire team full of 4- and 5-star talent, you're probably going to end up being pretty good. And again, looking at these numbers, and Jack does have a really good job, did a really good job of laying these all out on the table for, you know, those guys at their respective spots. All these guys' numbers, for the most part, are pretty solid. So that doesn't guarantee they're all going to come here and be amazing, but the more these type of guys you can bring in that had this level of success at their prior school, again, hopefully, and this does go back to coaching and development, all those kind of things, and adjusting what went wrong this past year, you hope that translates over to what can be a better season in 26. I know that's not a high bar to clear, but definitely a lot needed to change after the disaster that 2025 was.
Yeah, can you be competitive, I think, is the first step. And, interestingly enough, you look at some of these numbers, there are a lot of very impressive numbers on this list of guys. One of the players, quite frankly, with the least impressive numbers, Alex Philpott from Florida, must just have tremendous upside because 64 Analytics has him actually as South Carolina's highest-ranked transfer as the number 25 transfer portal prospect that's available, regardless of position. So I thought that was a little bit noteworthy. Probably has good stuff. It's gonna be a question there though. South Carolina's gonna have to develop him. But Reese Moore of the position players actually is the highest ranked guy. Again, just according to 64 Analytics that South Carolina has added. So that appears to be a really good pickup for them. And we'll see. I think now the other side is you're going to have to replace Ethan Petrie, and you're going to have to replace Nathan Hall. So just bringing these guys in doesn't automatically, I can't get worse. Like, we were terrible. I know people are going to say anything's better, but hey, you are replacing, in addition to everything else, you're replacing two, I would say at times, superstars. So, I do think that's worth noting that, it's not going to be easy. And ultimately, you got to pitch, man. I think the roster this past season, I'm not saying they were incredible offensively, but if you had great pitching and you had the same position players, the same lineup, it would be a much different perspective. We would have said, they were a pretty average offensive team, I think. But when you have the ERA and the runs surrendered and the WHIP, like all, if you look at all the stats, when you're doing that in terms of just, I think it's just very hard when you get down in games so much like they did in so many games. So, and then on top of that, your pitching coach that you let get away, that you did not bring back, is getting touted on ESPN yesterday as potentially the best assistant in the country.
And we'll get into Coastal here in just a second on what they're doing out in Omaha. And, again, the optics of that don't look great. You can understand why Maneri wanted to roll with his guy, his right-hand man, Terry Rooney, who had been with him for so many years. Like, I understand, obviously, hindsight being 2020, could Matt Rule have done better with his pitching staff? Maybe. We don't really know. But Matt Williams, excuse me. It definitely kind of twists the knife a little bit more on what was already a very disappointing season for South Carolina.
Well, we were talking about that the other day. I mean, with somebody like during a coaching change that happens, I mean, and that's not to say it was the right move, wrong move. Like, Matt Williams, very good coach, of course. But, like, every time there's a coach, you think about football, there's a coaching change. Like, coaches have their guys, and they bring them in, and good coaches who did a great job sometimes at their previous stuff, they get let go. So, kind of the nature of the beast. But, I mean, you're right, Tyler. Like, it's just it's another, like, data point that you look back on going, okay, like, there's another thing, So, look, at this point, like, what is done last season is done, and it's all about driving the thing forward. Obviously, that starts in the offseason. If you're not making any coaching changes to your actual staff, it's about how do you adjust what you're doing from a development standpoint, if you are going to make any adjustments there, and then what are you doing from a recruiting and a retention standpoint. And even if you're as down as possible in this program, they have kept some pieces and are bringing in some pieces where you can at least go, okay, like I can see the potential and the possibility there.
Speaking of Coastal Carolina, doing a lot of great things out in Omaha. We'll hit that coming up next to wrap up the hour. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here in the game.
2-2. 2-2. Swing and a miss. The Teal is for real. Another win. 25 in a row for Coastal.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, Tyrewest and Chris. Yes, the Teal is indeed for real as Coastal Carolina picks up their second win of the College World Series so far. Again, 25th win in a row as they are one win away from returning to the World Series final. They'll have a couple days off, play again on Wednesday, and if they win that third game, they'll be in the championship series coming up this weekend. Kevin Schnall made it a point coming away from the regional a couple weeks ago that, or super regional a couple weeks ago, that, hey, we're not a Cinderella. Don't treat us like one. And they're going out there and proving exactly why in the two games they've played so far.
You also saw he made a point to say Chanticleers.
Yes. Pronouncing it right.
Chanticleers.
Yes, not Chanticleers, Chanticleers.
I feel like I've pronounced it wrong at times in my
I think we all have.
In my life, so
he's putting us on.
I would like to respectfully apologize for that, but Chanticleer, hey man, these guys are for real. I agree with what he's saying though. They are not a Cinderella story. This is not a couple of balls snuck through the infield and we beat a couple teams we weren't supposed to beat. Like they may win the thing, man. Like they really may, and they're very gritty defensively, but even that can be a little bit of a kind of like, oh, you're a game managing quarterback. They're not only gritty, they're talented. So very impressed, man. Pitching staff is deep. The guys they had on the mound yesterday I thought were fantastic, and defense backed them up. And yeah, I mean, if they win the whole thing, it's not a fluke. It's not even they got hot at the right time. They've been hot for 25 straight games. So they may truly be the best team in the country.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I totally agree with you. They haven't just.
Yeah, is it a Cinderella story?
No, no. I mean, because at this point they're not. I mean, they're 55-11. You know. It would be more like when Ole Miss won few years ago. That was more, even though it's Ole Miss, an SEC team, that's more of a Cinderella because they got hot at the end of the year.
Sure.
But they weren't very good most of the year. If you had replaced the name Ole Miss with some other random team, Murray State or something,
sure,
that's more of a Cinderella. This is a team that's been flat out dominant at times. What's our guy's name who's the pitcher? I mean, he's 12-0, Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're outstanding. I've also kind of liked, by the way, we'll get back to Coastal, I promise, but, Louisville knocked Arizona out, and it's kind of been cool to watch them, how they have had a resurgence, because Dan McDonnell, who has come up a couple times here in Columbia when there's been openings, he had to kind of adjust into this new era, and I think he's done it, and he's been able to marry his new school approach with his old school approach. Like I was reading a story on ESPN where he basically huddled his team together in the dugout when they were behind and gave them a talking to.
Sure.
And that sparked them to win. So that's been, I think, another cool story within this thing.
I think interesting tonight, and again, Coastal's got a couple days off before they play again on Wednesday. Tonight, elimination game between Arkansas and Murray State. Arkansas lost their first game to LSU, so you're either going to see what was many thought to be the overall favorite going in, and Arkansas State lose tonight and be eliminated, or Murray State, again, that actual Cinderella story, see that run, come to an end. So high stakes tonight, this afternoon, actually, UCLA and LSU in the winner's bracket coming up later on tonight to kind of set the field for what the rest of the week is going to look like. But some crazy stuff this weekend so far, and Louisville, 6 runs in the bottom of the 8th yesterday to pull away and eliminate, Arizona in that one. And again, Coastal looking like the team that's got the hot hand right now to see if they can win 3 more games and take this thing home.
Yeah, and that would be, not to get too far ahead, man, that would be 2 for them in their history.
In the past decade.
Yeah, so.
All since the last time South Carolina went to Omaha.
Well, you didn't have to just.
Well, being honest here, I mean,
yeah,
it's legitimate debate. Are they the best program in the state? They look like it right now.
Well, they're definitely the best team in the state.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, for this year, for sure.
That's not even in question. And you know what might be the most impressive thing about them too is that they've been up for the moment. You know what I'm saying? Like, they really have not. I mean, look, just the Oregon State second baseman yesterday. Not to pick on him, but this dude had a 996 fielding percentage, and then he lets the ball go through the wickets. Double play ball, end of inning. They score one, and they score another after that. And I'm going, man, that guy probably makes that play every single time. But when you have all those people, all those eyeballs on you, it is a little bit different. The teams that can, much like we saw with those 3 South Carolina teams, the teams that can deal with all of that the best typically will win it. And right now, Coastal looks like they're having a day at the beach.
Absolutely. Again, playing on Wednesday. One more win, and they get themselves in the World Series final coming up this weekend. That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show myself, Terry Ford, up next on your Monday on the Game.
All right, excited because our friends at Firehouse Subs, Larry Chandler, owner-operator of all of the Midlands Firehouse Subs locations, they got a new limited-time sub offering. It is back. It is the Smokin' Barbecue Triple Stack, and they've got multiple options, actually, of the type of triple stack you can get. But basically, it is your classic barbecue triple stack. It's got